As you know, last time we met, we got to go through most of the questions that people asked, but there were three categories that we were not able to answer. One was there were about 7 questions related to return to campus. There were about 12 questions related to inclusion and transparency and decisions. And then there was one left related to issues of diversity and policy. So we thought we would start where we left off, and I'm going to ask Gary to answer. There were several questions about return to campus. People have a variety of concerns in terms of cases, how we're going to manage any increase in cases, what the plan is for coming back, how we are working issues around ventilation that people had concerns with, and then the contact tracing, et cetera. So I'm sure Gary has lots of really great information, so I'm going to ask him to go ahead and address the questions that were asked. Plus, he may have some additional things since the governor just released additional documentation about what he expects for colleges in the state of Vermont. So Gary, go ahead.
Good. Thank you very much, Patty. And let me add to what Patty said. I welcome the opportunity to come back to Staff Council and to answer some of your questions. But let me first start by saying, because as some of you recall on Tuesday morning, when you had that great awards session and you recognize various staff members, for whatever reason, I think Alan silenced me, or maybe Stephen silenced me, and I couldn't talk. I just want to congratulate all the recipients of the awards. That was a special occasion done remotely, and it was really, truly special. So let me talk about some of the return to campus issues that have been raised here. And as Patty indicated, earlier this week, the governor issued his plan for a safe return for colleges and universities across the state. We were active in that process of developing the plan. There are a lot of elements in that we had been planning for, and some that we need to start doing some work on. What I've said in a variety of settings is that this is a dynamic situation, and it's something that we have to be prepared to accept that, you know, what we talk about this morning may not necessarily be what's in place next week. I mean, there were certain elements that, as we were developing the plan, that we were looking at, and the governor suggested that when it finally came out, it was different. So we're going to make some changes there, and I think it's likely to assume that elements of it will change. I think there's one aspect of it that is particularly complicated, and we can talk more about that if time wants, and that's the move-in and the quarantine requirements that our students are going to have to deal with when they arrive on campus. And we did a really great session last evening with new students and their families. Some fantastic questions about the process of moving in and the residential life and dining. We're doing one tonight for the current students, and shortly we will be announcing a series of Teams Live sessions for all staff that Patty and I will be hosting on a series of topics in the coming weeks, and allowing time for sort of a brief presentation followed by a time of Q&A that will be curated. So with that in mind, the first question up had to do with will the university be liable if students or anybody is infected while on campus? You know, I think that's an unknown question at this point. I mean, if you follow any of this, there has not been a lot of litigation out there right now. There has been some desire on the part of some higher ed groups to try to seek protection as a university and higher ed institutions in general from liability, but it's just unknown. I think part of it's going to have to be is that it's going to look at what we've done and our steps to prevent the spread of it. Next question, with the upsurge in COVID cases around the country, you've been expecting thousands of out-of-state students to return to campus. Will UVM protect the Burlington campus community and Burlington and campus community by requiring mandatory testing of all staff, faculty, students prior to classes starting? So since this question came in, a lot has transpired. As you know, we announced recently that we will be doing twice a week required testing for all students. That's students on and off campus will be required to do testing. We're finalizing those arrangements with a outside lab to process those results. We're working through the details about where those samplings will occur on campus. They are not the more invasive type of tests that we've all heard about. I'm very pleased with what the options are out there, and I expect that probably within the next week to 10 days, we'll be able to be more specific of that. We're still working out the terms and conditions around those. But as I pointed out, every student will be required, undergrad, grad, medical, everyone begin August to do that. We're also going to do what's called a day zero test for all students. And that is when students arrive on campus, resident students, they're going to be required to do a day zero test as a baseline for their the knowledge of that. At this point, we are not going to require faculty and staff testing. That is something that has been raised. At this point, we're not doing it. We're looking about the availability if we have a situation where an employee, faculty, staff may need to be tested, whether they could be included in this process that we're developing for students. But at this time, we are not requiring it of faculty and staff. We'll talk a little bit about too that probably beginning in the next 10 days, we will be rolling out our daily health screening app. It's a process that our folks, and I know there's people on here from ETS, have done just an amazing job developing. I saw an early version of it this week, and it's going to help us with a process that we're going to do for all employees. And now, as part of the governor's plan, to require the same of all students before they come on campus. And that's going to be a very simple process. It can be done either as an app or online as a computer. Before you come to work, just fill out a series of questions that indicate whether you have symptoms of COVID-19 or not. And then it gives you directions on what you should do. We're trying to make this as simple as possible. We're taking into account issues of language and accessibility as well, too. So I would say stay tuned for that. It's going to be coming out shortly on that. Give me 1 second. We'd like to know, understand the rationale why a number of cases on campus will not be shared. So this is a question that came up earlier, and I take it to heart, the concerns that people are expressing, and we're working through trying to understand how best to understand that. I think what we have to balance that against is the need to know and want to know. So I think that we have to make sure that we protect individuals' privacy. So I see, 30, 40 some odd staff members here. If I say we have 2 staff members tested positive, I need to make sure that your health information is protected and that it doesn't get out that XYZ staff member has tested positive, because we need to protect that. So I would say that we just need to give us some time to sort that out. I recognize the need for that sort of information, but we're trying to balance that out. Next question, is there a threshold of active cases that will prompt us to move back to remote operations? So that's a question that we're working closely with a number of people. I've got a team that is developing a series of metrics and dashboards that we're going to use to track a number of issues. So I think it's not just cases on campus, it's not just student cases on campus. It will have a lot of things that we need to take into account. So for example, what's the status of our isolation beds on campus? If we start to max out the number of beds that are on campus, and we don't have a place to isolate, that may be another issue. I know folks on this call, some of you have played a really key part in helping build out our central warehouse of PPEs and sanitation supplies. If we run into a situation that our commitment to have 2 and 6 months of supplies of those start to decline, then we have a different sort of issue, regardless of how many cases we may have on campus. So I would say that, and then we might want to say, well, on campus, we're doing great, but maybe in Chittenden County, we've got a spike, or we have a spike in Vermont that's out there. So I would say that before long, we're going to have some very defined metrics. We're meeting with the state, actually meeting this afternoon with the city of Burlington, along with Vermont Department of Health people, to talk broadly about those spectrums. But there's just not one single metric that we have in there. Next 2 questions that came up had to do with ventilation systems on campus and concern for that. So we're going through a process that many of you are familiar with of the resumption operation plans. We're asking that every director and department and activity submit a resumption of plan. That's something that we've got a committee, and some of you I know here are part of that process, are reviewing those plans, making adjustments, and making sure that the plan that was submitted is an appropriate, safe plan for return of work for the individuals and staff and faculty in that unit, but also for students. An element of that is ventilation. And if the person who submits that plan indicates that there are ventilation issues, we can have somebody check that out to see what mitigation strategies we might need to do. It might need to be where we need to reduce occupancy in there. We may need to install filters of some sort. So I would say make sure that if you are concerned, make sure that your director, coordinator, whoever is submitting your plan, identify those issues when they submit the plans. Next question had a concern about the implication of a contact tracing app, both from a civil liberties and social justice perspective. I'm concerned that UVM can and will use the data collected purpose beyond simple contact tracing to penalize our most marginalized community members. I would just want to say that if we pursue that app, that is something that we will be very mindful of. We're very mindful of privacy concerns associated with that. And we will not pursue any use of an app if we feel that that information can be in any way compromised. One of the elements of the governor's plan that he announced this week is an expectation that we encourage everyone on campus, faculty, staff, and students to maintain a contact trace log or diary, so that if for some reason we need to ask you who your contacts were for the last 3 days or 4 days, you have that readily available. The app primarily, and it would be a voluntary app, it would not be a required app, primarily helps us with that process of identifying those so that we can reach out to the people that you've been in touch with or people who've been tested positive with, so we can address their concerns, contact them, inform them about the need possibly to quarantine, to protect themselves, to protect family members, to protect their coworkers. So that's the reason for it. But again, if there ends up being issues both around privacy and use of that data, we will not pursue the use of that. You're muted.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gary. I'm sure there will be other questions about our return to work and bringing students to campus, and you are my resident expert. There were about 12 questions that were related to people feeling like they weren't really included in a lot of the decision making and the processes that came forward, not really understanding the time frames, considering the unique circumstances of individuals, making sure that we're creating a space for our staff to be able to communicate, and really re-examining some of our policies and making sure that the questions that you are asking are being answered. So in those 12 clustered questions, let me try and answer as many as I can. I think we talked a lot about communication last time and how we could do better. And so this will add to that in terms of the inclusiveness and transparency. I think probably most of you realize that some of the challenges the university is facing are clearly systemic and predate the pandemic. So these do offer us an opportunity to explore solutions together and do that a little more effectively. I think the pressing situations brought around by the pandemic required more swift action and were less conducive to really inclusive processes where we really try to get everybody's input. Because as Gary said, oftentimes decisions have to be made immediately, and the governor is coming out with different frameworks for us to think about, and it could start on Friday, changes on Monday, and then Wednesday it's new information. So that makes it a little more challenging. We do understand the hurt and disappointment that our frontline staff are feeling, because you are our worker bees and you're out there trying to answer questions, trying to understand what's happening. So I think we agree that broad representation is important, and we will be very mindful of that. Just so you know, staff are represented on each of our UVM Strong fall planning group and all of our work groups. And in our children's campus school that we talked about last time, 4 of the 8 members are also staff. And there will be an opportunity, as Jess Krause is leading that, he is going to be gathering information from other community members. So look for those times when he's going to be asking for people's perspective on the children's campus school. We also recognize that each staff member's personal circumstances are highly unique and complicated. And at the same time, we're really working hard to keep people safe and healthy, as Gary mentioned, and ensuring that we have an institution that we can actually come to, that people can work and learn in. And so I think the resumption to work and making sure your space feels safe and that you feel you are in a safe environment is important to us. If Gary has always said that if the jobs can be done remotely and there are individuals here who need to respond to any face-to-face questions, that's great. But we are very supportive of people working remotely. If you can be effective and efficient, then it de-densifies the community and helps us, especially those who are more compromised. I think I absolutely agree that we can do a much better job to identify our decision-making processes, the timelines that we're using, expectations, and I've spoken with President Garamella, and we're really committed to doing this. I actually am trying to work on a framework where it says, here's all the decisions, here's the processes that got us to that, and here's how we're going to try and do it going forward. Amidst all the other things that are happening, like our latest challenge has been with making sure that our international students can stay here. So that will be coming soon. I am working on something that will just lay out everything that we've done and what we would like to see going forward. And again, I think the timing has largely been driven by circumstances and the desire to communicate with employees as soon as possible. We also agree that women and our Black, Indigenous, and persons of color must be heard, and we're going to continue those discussions on the best way to ensure that. I know there was one question about mandatory furloughs, and before talking with you, I checked on this for sure. We're not really contemplating university-wide mandatory furloughs. Individual units may impose some furloughs in some circumstances. That will be an individual unit's decision. As a university, we'll always work hard to ensure that our practices and our strategies are not discriminatory. So I think one of the things that the last group of questions, there were about 4 big questions, and this was about policy review and diversity issues. And I know the last time President Garamella ended with his strong commitment to diversity, being a person of color himself, born in another country, experiencing life as an international student, understanding the issues that impact persons of color. This is very important to him. So one of the questions was the goal and hope that the presidents, the provost, and the vice presidents are using an equity lens when we're making these kinds of decisions, and really asking the question, will this have a disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable in our community? And what I can say from my own perspective, and I'm sure President Garamella's as well, absolutely. These are always important considerations. This is why we looked at salary reductions for people under 45,000 with no reduction, trying to consider the commitment to fairness. I understand that there's disagreement on the progressiveness of that framework, and staff have shared with me some of their understanding of cost of living. And even though the percentage does mean larger for people who make more, still the cost of living seems unequal. I hear your point. You're absolutely correct. There was another question about what does the anti-racism training and work look like at the administrative level? This is a fair question and a good one. In case you don't know, the past few years, senior leaders at the university have participated in several diversity trainings that are pretty much required. And we usually do 2 per year in diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings, one in the fall and one in the spring semester. They're usually intense, 2 to 3 hours, and oftentimes we stay longer because there's so many questions that people have. The intention is to continue these professional development opportunities. Now this fall, Wanda was working with us and had to cancel the one that was scheduled during COVID. As you know, we all participate in Blackboard Jungle. I've been doing it for as many years as I can remember. Senior leaders actually support their faculty and staff and often pay for them to go to these annual Blackboard symposiums. And Wanda and I have talked about how powerful those have become. And we also attend national conferences now, more remotely and virtually than day to day. Also, there have been several interfaith workshops, and I've participated in almost all of those. I find them very helpful. Another question was about the Division of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion hosted mini-series on systemic racism. What is the administration doing to audit their policies and the way decisions are being made? Another excellent question. The senior leadership, as I mentioned, engages in diversity training, anti-bias training, et cetera, through the leadership of our VP for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Wanda Heading Grant. We all have attended and participated in the Amazing Grace video. You know, both Suresh and I did a piece on that. Also, the 3 teach-ins, which were outstanding. I also watched those and felt I learned a tremendous amount. As you know, too, all units develop inclusive excellence plans. And so now as the provost, since that has been really important to me, I've reviewed every unit's inclusive excellence plans, not just the 22 people that report to me, but also all the VPs. Units as well, because Paul, Wanda, and I decided together we would work to really give people actually feedback on their inclusive excellence plans, because it's something that I believe in strongly. For those who report to me, I required this year in their evaluations that they had to put in the updates that they had in their inclusive excellence plans. What were their goals that were achieved, what goals were not achieved, how are they going to move the next year, the next 3 years. And then I also asked them to look at the recent climate survey and how are they including the results of the climate survey in their inclusive excellence plans. And to my great delight, every single direct report did that. And I was able to give feedback to them about what's going forward. And then Wanda and I will be putting all of those together and see, as an institution, what are we doing? And how can we move the dial further? We also are considering the diversity lens when we're looking at policies. We recognize these need attention. I know when I was dean of the College of Nursing and Health Sciences, our Inclusive Excellence Committee started doing policy review, looking at our language, and we made significant changes in all our forms. The Provost office is now going through a review of all the forms that we're using to see how those are being responsive or not responsive. I think it's very important for institutions like ours to understand the impact of policies on every single member of the community. So here's some things that we're going to be doing, kind of auditing what our action plans are. So we're going to focus back on those inclusive excellence plans that all the divisions and colleges turned in. And we will ask all the direct reports to think about conducting an audit of their policies and protocols to determine how it is impacting groups of people in our community. So for an example, Richard, Kate might be looking at the Division of Finance and Administration and asked to look more closely at the recent pay cuts and how they've been announced, and to examine, did it disproportionately impact certain groups of people over other employees. That's just one thing. We're already starting to look at an examination of those. I know in my office, we're looking at our the grant and foundations that we're trying to work with to see if we can do a better job bringing scholarships for diverse groups of students, faculty, to support our diversity mentorships. And so we actually have been working with NSF, the National Science Foundation, and the HHMI, it's the Howard Hughes Foundation that looks at diversity initiatives. Just so you have a sense, the Blackboard Jungle Symposium, you know, when I first started in the first few years of the symposium, we'd have about 100 or so people, but since the symposium number 7, we had about 223, and in symposium 12, we had 490. So I think it is now people are recognizing the power of an opportunity collectively for our groups to get together and talk about these issues. And then I had some time to talk with Sherwood Smith, who, as you know, guides many of the activities in the Center for Cultural Pluralism. And he shared with me many of the events that were offered and how people have really, oops, we're having some back. Cultural awareness on internal and external self, and looking at socially systemic nature of power and privilege through critical thinking. And he's offered a variety of trainings that I've really encouraged my staff to go to. I know Gary has as well, and I've attended those as well. So I actually, when I was dean, had funding for faculty and staff to attend those and encourage them and gave them time to participate in those trainings. So I think those are the questions that you asked, and hopefully we answered them as best we could. We really appreciated the time that people took to really ask those more than 60 to 70 questions. And Steve, I will turn it back over to you. If people have additional questions about return to work, students coming back, what's happening, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. And just one last thing, as Gary mentioned, he and I will be co-hosting another 3 events for all of staff, just to kind of keep you up to date on what's happening with students, what's happening with faculty, because many of you are the ones who are hearing from faculty but not hearing directly what's going on, as well as how this will impact what people are doing day to day. So I'm really very much looking forward to those opportunities to be with Gary. We're finding that those are very effective with our families and our returning students and with our faculty. And both of us felt like it was very important that staff had the same opportunity to engage in the discussions about all of our planning. So Steve, back to you.
Thank you, Provost Prelock, and thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. I just want to reiterate from the point of staff council how disappointed we were that we weren't more involved in the decisions that were made and came down, especially around the budget cuts and the salary reductions. With such a large group of people being affected, it was shocking, to be honest. But I think now, I think we have some time for some questions and getting a little feedback as well. I will try to, as questions come in the chat, I will try to ask them as best I can. So from Brendan Andrews, will staff be required to sign the same green and gold promise that students will have to sign? A concern was brought to me regarding mandatory flu vaccinations. Just two separate questions there, but the first one being the green and gold promise that students have to sign, will staff be required as well?
So I'll answer that question. No, they will not be required to sign the green and gold promise. That's specific to students and not to employees. The governor does require that colleges and universities have a similar commitment that faculty and staff are expected to. And we're going to be working with folks on that, working with staff council to get the right wording around that. But the expectation is that employees will have a similar, but as you know, the green and gold speaks specifically to the promise. Let me explain a little bit about the flu requirement. That was a question that came up in a number of different venues. There's a number of reasons that was included in there. First is, as you know well, the symptoms of COVID are very similar to the flu. So if we eliminate those symptoms on campus by requiring a flu vaccination, it will help out in identifying potential COVID-19 cases. Also, quite frankly, if we can reduce the number of people who need to be treated for the flu during the year, reduces the strain on our medical professional, both our student health services on campus, but more broadly, the health professional in the Chittenden County area, if we can eliminate that. So that's the primary reasons for that. Patty, I see your hand up, so
Yeah, thank you, Gary, for answering that question. I just wanted to add, and Steve, to reflect on your response. This is an opportunity where staff council can have some real input. We're having the same conversation with faculty. We felt, if you listen to the governor's press conference, he was saying all faculty, staff, and students will have to make this commitment. And we feel that it will be important for staff council to work together to come up with what you feel comfortable. And you can look at the green and gold promise for students and say, this doesn't work for us, this does work, here's our commitment. We're doing the same thing with Faculty Senate and the UA, suggesting it's more appropriate for them to work on what is meaningful, and we will just provide support for that process. And we've let the governor's office and team know that that's what we're working towards.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Gary. Any other questions from staff on the call? Okay, got one here. John Reisenweaver, given the fluid nature of the university's plan for the fall and being in IT, it is worrying that we are seeing a new, whoa. Okay, I just clicked the more button. There's quite a bit more here. It's worrying that we are seeing a new trend. On the top 25 colleges and universities in the US, 7 have moved to almost exclusively online coursework. Many of the others will be mixed. There is also a massively growing list beyond the top 25 of institutions going remote only. This week and next week, we'll see many of those top 25 announce new plans for the fall, leaning more to remote learning. Is there a plan by leadership to change our current mixed delivery model?
Do you want me to handle that, Gary, or do
Well,
you?
You take first. Now, so I'll start. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, what's going on nationally is troubling, there's no hiding it. Vermont is doing exceptional. I mean, if you look at the numbers, and I don't want to minimize any case as bad, but the strategy the Vermont Department of Health and the governor's used has really paid off. But it's troubling, whether it's Florida, whether it's Texas, Arizona, you know, all the states that are problems. It's concerning. And we're practically hourly on this. So one of the advantages that have occurred over the last several weeks that Patty and the deans and the faculty have done so well is really aggressively build out those courses that are remote and that are hybrid and are delivered in a variety of ways. Getting a lot of feedback there. So I'll pause a second. So we built a lot of that delivery out there so that if we have to make a pivot, either by our own decision or by the decision of the governor, because the governor made the decision really for us largely, you know, we initiated it, and not long after that, he said, stay home, stay safe. So whoever calls it, but it could be a decision that comes down from the governor as well. Again, I think we're far better positioned to make that transition than we were before. Some of the great programs, and again, I know some of the members on this call today have been involved in the training that's gone on both through CTL and CDE and other programs on campus to really outfit and build out what we need to deliver that high quality experience. I think we're positioned for it. And John, I know the work your folks have done in ETS have done phenomenal to build out that. I mean, I mentioned earlier the work you guys have done on the health screening app. It was great. We were looking at buying something off the shelf from somewhere. You created our own. Some of the support you've done for classroom technologies and creating the technical pods that we're going to have. So what I mean by that, a teaching pod, is let's say the faculty member wants to teach entirely remote, so no in-person operations, but they want more than just the webcam like we're doing right now. They want to have some ability to engage stuff in the room, and they want to have it. We're building out those pods. That's something we didn't have before that would be able to support that initiative if we end up having to make the decision. I know we all hope we don't have to, but there's a lot going on out there, and it's troubling.
Yeah, this is Patty. You know, my oldest son and grandchildren are in Arizona, and my nieces and nephews are in Texas. And so we talk almost every other day about the spikes that they're experiencing. And it's a reminder to me to tell them this is why they should be in Vermont. So we are very fortunate. I think the governor has done a very good job, and we've worked carefully with the Vermont Department of Health, and Gary has been a really important part of that. So I feel really fortunate to live in Vermont. I think our IT and ETS staff has been nothing but extraordinary in this process. And so we've done a few things to address your specific question. The first thing is you probably just saw the email that was sent out at the end, just before the holiday, where we're giving students a choice to stay home and do their coursework remote, or to come on campus, and here's our expectations for them to meet our expectations, kind of the green and gold promise, so that we can keep Vermont as safe as it is now. We will know in the next week how many students actually choose that option. It meant that our registrar's office, our student financial services, ETS, everyone had to work together, advisors, et cetera, to figure out how we could build out a schedule of courses. Right now we have 4 modes of delivery. We have face-to-face, we have remote instruction, where students might, be at home. Or we have a person, a faculty member who's in one of these pods that Gary mentioned, and talking with students, but it's synchronous, online, which is asynchronous, or some mixed hybrid of that. This gives us the best possibility to de-densify the population, which, some of these larger cities and states, that's what they're experiencing. And also, quite frankly, they're not as compliant as our dear Vermonters are in following the expectations. I think these pods and the ability to live stream every course is going to help us if we would have to pivot. Yes, so we're always thinking about the future. We are being very clear with faculty that they should design their content in a way that it can be delivered. Mode of delivery shouldn't be a huge piece, so that in case we have to, and remember, we're ending the semester for face-to-face on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So the faculty already know the last 2 weeks of classes are going to be totally remote. So if it wasn't for CTL, CDE, ETS, all the training that's been going on, this is where I'm having a new high-level appreciation for our tech gurus, because you are nothing but amazing. You should know right now about 40% of our courses are going to be online or remote. And then the others are going to be mixed delivery or face-to-face, all with social distancing. Gary and his team and Physical Plant has also done an unbelievable job in mapping out classrooms so that students have 6 feet around them, faculty have face shields, all of those pieces. So I feel really comfortable with our approach, and I feel the close connection that Gary and the UVM Strong Advisory Committee has with the Department of Health and the governor and the mayor has been very useful.
And I would just add along with that is, so we did 3 sessions with students and families, and they are so excited and anxious and want to come back. I mean, it was great, the questions we had last night. We had almost 1,000 people participate last night. And, they're nervous, they're concerned, but I think we're going to find tonight as well that they want to be back. They want to be back on campus, and we all want to be back on campus as well, too. So Michael, I see your question about sharing information, and I appreciate that. And again, we're thinking that through, and I hear your concerns about making sure that we are appropriately communicating the status of things on campus. So Michael, I appreciate your thoughts there.
For some reason, I can't see any questions, so I'm counting.
Okay.
Okay, so are there any other questions?
So I do see a question here. So, okay, so let me try to read. Would the university consider requiring the entire community, staff, faculty, and students to participate in a common learning on COVID-19 as a way of increasing safety for all of us and offering reassurance to the community? The Johns Hopkins course is a great, short, and thorough. It's free and offers completion certificate and focuses on contact tracing, but even if one is not going into that field, the understanding that it offers helps inform daily actions and responsibility. Okay, sure. So I would say that one, all of our employees are required to participate in the university training, and the response has been overwhelmingly positive with compliance for that. I mean, I forget the last numbers, but near +% participation. So great. Appreciate that. We're building out an identical training program for all of our students as well that they're going to be required to take before they start classes in the fall. And at the end of that training is going to be where they acknowledge a concurrence with the green and gold promise. So that's going to be the last thing that they have to do. And they have to go through the training and they have to say that And if they don't, we were working out a series of consequences, mindful that this is going to be a stressful fall. We don't want to have it to be too impactful, but that's why we're going to rolling it out as early in August as possible with repeated reminders so that ideally we'll have 100% before people get there. I've seen the stuff from Johns Hopkins. It's very good. They offer a great program in contact tracing, and we're looking at possibly using that as well too. I have to tell you, I did have some concerns. People say it's a 6-hour training program. If we're referring to the same one, I'm not sure if we're not, whether they feel comfortable going through that. I get it, but there's a lot we're expecting people out there. Question was, can you speak to the anxieties, emotional and mental health of staff and the UVM community as a whole regarding return to campus? The possible pushback to want to work from home, pressure placed to work on campus, and fears people will and do have. What specific supports are or will be in place beyond what EAP can do that can be offered? So I would say that we will make sure that EAP has the ability to stand up at whatever support we need to address those anxieties. I want to reiterate what Patty said about the work remote option. We've been very flexible with that. We've extended to non-exempt employees as well as exempt employees. We're working with supervisors to be as accommodating of that as possible. But I think what has to be reminded is that what we need to do is that we need to keep in mind that we need to have a level of service and operation to support a campus that could have 13,000 students on it. So we got to balance it. We got to make sure it all works out, but we're certainly mindful about wanting to make sure that the anxieties and concerns, emotional concerns of all faculty, staff, and students are addressed and cared for on this campus. So another question came up. When do you anticipate making a decision about the academic calendar for spring? Is there a time frame that you can share? That's a big question. I think that I'll speak from my planning side, and I'll let Patty. I think what we're probably going to do is need to get into the fall, get the fall up and going, and then start to look at the state of everything at that point. And when I mean everything, I mean it could be that the nationwide spread is so significant. It could be that the governor makes a decision. There's been talk about maybe we should start later, and I think there's some advantage to that. There's not a lot of advantage to that. What it is advantageous is what we did with the fall calendar, which was to give that large gap of time between the end of fall and the start of spring without movement back and forth. I'm not so sure if we move the start of spring 2 weeks later, we're going to get much benefit on that. Now, might we decide to start spring semester for a period of time remote and then transition earlier in February? But we have to remember on the other end of that is commencement and not wanting to get too far. If we extend the semester by a week, 2 weeks, then we run into some logistical problems with that as well. So I would say, Jillian, that we're going to be looking at that time frame once we get into fall. I mean, it's a changing situation, and not having enough information at this point to know what fall is going to look like, let alone what spring is going to look like. So when will students living in the dorms be moving back to campus? Okay, so that was a popular question last night. Okay, and I will try in the time we got left to explain it. And it is not easy to explain. Okay, so as somebody said last night, Gary, this is your SAT course. So it's like, if I drive 200 miles at X speed, whatever, when will I arrive in UVM? So here's the challenge you have. It all starts with, where is the person coming from? Okay, so if you followed the information that's on the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, ACCD site, the governor has identified what we are calling trusted or safe. And those are now all across the Northeast. I think it goes all the way out to Ohio, West Virginia, Maryland, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, all of New England. All of those counties are rated if they are able to travel to Vermont, UVM, without needing to meet any quarantine. They have to have 400 per million cases or less in order to be considered a trusted county. Those counties are adjusted every Friday, and the governor said whatever's in place as of August 1st will be what will determine that's safe county. So if I'm in a safe county and I live in Maine, York County, I think that's one of the counties, it's a safe county right now. I have to travel from my home directly to campus without stopping over anywhere, and I can come in without any quarantine. If I'm coming from a county that is greater than the 400 per million, I then have a series of options with regards to quarantine. Voluntary quarantine in place at my home prior to coming to campus for 14 days. We're going to ask people to personally verify on the honesty, because we have no way to check 2,500 households, that they've complied with this requirement. Or they can quarantine for 7 days, get a negative COVID-19 test at their home state, either through a county health department, state health department, whatever means there, bring those test results, bring proof that they have tested negative, and then they can waive the balance of that quarantine period in Vermont. Then there is the population on campus, and I don't know how somebody, I'm drawing a complete blank on her name, did an amazing job calculating how many miles away all of our students are from UVM. We were able to calculate there's about 750 resident students that are outside of 400 miles. And we kind of said, well, why 400 miles? 400 miles is kind of not a good day's drive, but it is a drive that you can do nonstop. What we're going to be doing is setting aside space on campus that those students can arrive as early as, don't quote me on this, I got a lot of dates in my mind, August 14th, Friday, August 14th, where they can move into their residence hall rooms that they're going to be in permanently with their family members. And I know there was some confusion. I want to correct this early on. Early in one of the sessions, a parent asked how many can come to UVM during move-in day. At that point, the state was looking at saying only one person per student. It's since 2. So when they move in, they'll be able to move into their permanent room assignment. And then we've identified 2 residence halls where the students can quarantine in place for 7 days in Burlington at UVM. At the end of the 7 days, they will get a COVID test, and if they test negative, they can move right from there into the residence halls. And that's going to be somewhere roughly around the 21st to the 22nd of the month. And then we're going to begin move-in probably that following Monday or Tuesday, and move-in will be stretched out over that entire week so that we can stagger move-in, so that we can manage the social distancing. Also, if people are traveling, so that we're going to have to do day 0 testing for everybody as well too. So RAF and the residential life staff have done an amazing job developing this plan and organizing it. So that's how that move-in process is going to occur in the hall. So normally, as many of you know, and many of you have volunteered over the years, we do a great job that Friday before classes start with going over and volunteering and helping people carry their stuff into the rooms. That's a great time for everybody. It's going to be probably at least a 2-week experience to get everybody moved in and settled before we can even start that whole process of the fall. So that was a long answer. It is a complex situation. A lot of information in the next 10 days to family about signing up for when they can move in, all that type of stuff. Deb, I'm sorry, I've been moving through stuff a lot. It says, what was that called? I'm not sure what the question is. If you want to repost it, I'd be happy to try to answer it. In follow-up to the question about the spring academic calendar, if there's a large second wave with most students leaving and coming back to campus a week later for spring break, that would be a scary time. Will you be considering that when looking at spring? Absolutely. I mean, we're making these decisions day by day. When noon, usually I check the state numbers. I have a group that meets daily, and I get an update on the regional numbers. So our decisions are being made real time in there. So good question there, Laura. And that's why, and Jillian, thanks for your nice note back. Deciding on spring is going to be hard, but we're going to get to it in there. And there's the winter term. I'm not sure the right name. That's in there as well too. We've not made decisions about that yet, and that has a lot of travel opportunities in there. And that's something we're going to need to think about as we get closer to that as well too.
Patty, your hand's up.
Yeah, thanks. Again, I don't know why. I probably would have to shut down my system because I can't see any questions. But just to reiterate what Gary said, the travel piece, we canceled all our exchange student and international travel in the fall. We will be making a decision about travel for spring semester, probably early November. So I'm assuming by that time we will also know what our plan is likely to be for spring. But as Gary says, things change moment by moment. The point is well taken about spring break, and we're going to have to be thoughtful about it, just like we did with Thanksgiving break, so that students would not come back.
So I think we've probably got about time for one more question. I don't see anything in the chat unless I missed it. So if I did, if someone either raised their hand or put it up there. But and while I'm looking to see if other people, again, we're going to have 3 sessions coming up shortly. We're going to focus on different topics around the student experience, about safe planning and all the different details in there about how to order supplies for your workspace. All that will be action. There's going to be a session on academics and all that we're doing in there. What is the plan for international students coming to campus? Heather, thank you. Good question. So, Heather, they are in the same category as those students that have to travel a long distance. Okay, it's whether it's from Idaho, as I got a question from a parent last night, or whether they're coming from China. They're going to have to fit in that quarantine time, and we're making it available on campus, and we're going to deliver food to the residence halls, take care of all their needs while they're here. That's the group in there. And I appreciate, and the president sent out a wonderful note of support for our international students, and I hope there's change in that. And I think we all put that in there. So that's our plan for international students when they come to campus. Same strategy as far as testing, no different. Day 0 test, twice a week testing. We're going to be doing 2 tests a week, one on Monday, one group on. Right now, we're modeling about 6,500 tests a day. So you can imagine the logistics we got going into that, and a great team building that out. So, Patty, sorry.
No, it's great. Just to reinforce the whole international piece, we've been in touch with all of our international students. And just so people understand, we're working with the deans, directors, and chairs until hopefully things change. But as long as the students have at least one class that has some element of face-to-face, they're fine. We have had some questions from international students, like we have a student in Taiwan who really, her parents are worried about her traveling. And so we're working on her schedule so that it can be fully remote. And all graduate students are pretty much not impacted because we're not having the requirement for remote option. And as long as students are enrolled continuously in some of their activities and they're meeting with advisors, we can work it out. So individually, we have been communicating with each one of our international students, and I think things will be okay.
So Caleb, we'll give you the last question. It's a question about plans to outreach to the BIPOC community, about their concern around some of the decisions that were made. I'll talk that over with Patty and with Wanda as well too, and think about a strategy around that. So Stephen, I think we've about reached the 9:30 time mark. Again, thank you all, and you know, as I've said countless times, your support and effort around here, staff council, the weekly newsletter, I know Elizabeth and Alan are here, but all your has been wonderful, and the work you've done since this all started back early March. It seems like a couple of years ago, but I know that the president appreciates it. All of us greatly appreciate the hard work.
Yes, and I ditto from me, and thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Thank you both, Gary and Patty. Appreciate you taking the time to address some of those questions that we didn't get to. Still some work to do. We'll continue to move forward and try to get out in front of all this and make people feel as comfortable and safe as possible coming back to campus. And we'll continue to work with administration and voice the concerns of staff.
And I would just, Rich Wallback's first comment up here is one up we should all leave with. It's going to be hot. Stay hydrated.
Indeed.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Yeah, everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.